Good evening. So glad to be with you all this evening. As was mentioned earlier, I am from Tuscaloosa. Me and my wife have driven up here, and we've been very excited to be here, and we're so thankful for the invitation, the opportunity to be here this morning. Yes, I do. Thank you. Appreciate it. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 6. So if you want to turn there, we're going to begin there, and we're going to be working through the story of Noah. Now, as I've been growing, like as a Christian, I've only been preaching for a couple of years now, and while I grew up in a family that was very Christ-centered, learning to make the faith my own has been a pretty big deal, and that means that also I've had to encounter people with naturally counter arguments to why Christians should believe anything about who God is. And a big one that's come up recently is the story that we're going to be studying tonight, the story of Noah. Because if God is love, if God is so loving and so compassionate and so caring, how in the world could he do something as disastrous as flood the entire world, to flood his whole creation, to blot out all life? Now this evening, I really want to understand this lesson. I think it's very important for us to, and I believe the text explains for us very clearly why this is important for us to know. So we're going to be talking about handling the balance between the justice and the mercy of God. So, if you want to start off reading with me, we're going to begin in Genesis 6, and I'm going to read verses 1 through 7. When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were attractive, and they took their wives any as they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh, and his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. So, taking a pause in the text there. This passage, I think a lot of people delve into it and they want to understand, what are the Nephilim? Are these angels? Like, what are the giants? I think if you delve too much into that, you forget what the point of this passage is. We see a very disastrous side of humanity here. That we have the privilege of living in a place, in a world that is post-Christ. And as much as people will tell you that Christianity has not affected the world that much, that is wrong. The fact that we believe in human dignity, that is something that is abnormal to how the rest of the world has acted for pretty much since man has entered the earth. The idea that babies should not just be left on the side of the road, that is what was normal back in this time. We have the opportunity to see the world through a Christ-centered lens. Back then, they didn't have this. So this was truly a barbaric time. And when it says violence was covering the earth, and the thoughts of everything they wanted to do was purely selfish and purely evil, that's a world we don't even know. I don't think we can comprehend that level of evil. So it's very important for us that we consider where these people are right now. They are evil, they are broken. So what we need to do is, put ourselves in this text and understand God's attitude towards sin. We see quickly in this text, firstly, not only does God know the intention and thoughts of everybody, but also in verse 6 that he has regretted making mankind. Now, I don't think that we should take this to mean God didn't know this was going to happen or something like that he lacks the ability to see in the future. But rather, have the terms in English or in any language to put into terms exactly what God feels. But there's this understanding that our sin it grieves God. It causes him pain to know that we would do something so terrible towards him, that we do something so terrible towards ourselves, that we do something so terrible towards one another. And we see that this has an effect not just on us and not just an effect on our relationship with God, but it's going to have a relationship with the rest of the world. That the animals don't deserve to suffer, but because of man's sin, they do. I think we have to take sin much more seriously for a lot of reasons. It's the effects that it has on us and on other people, but also that it grieves the heart of God. It grieves the one who cares most for us. And especially for those of us who now know that Christ came into the world to save us, why would we grieve the one who laid down his life for us? What we have here at the end of the passage we just read is a very bleak picture of where mankind is and the justice he so duly deserves for his actions. It should frighten us. It should scare us that God sees the need to destroy it all. But naturally, as we know, the story does not end here. And as we're going to pick up in verse 8, there is this glimmer of hope. So, starting in verse 8, I'm going to be reading through 6 and verse 22. It says, "But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord." These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. And Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, "I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make the rooms in the ark and cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you are to make it. The length of the ark was 300 cubits, its breadth 50 cubits, and height 30 cubits. Make a roof for the ark, and finish it to a cubit above, and set the door of the ark on its side. Make it with a lower, second, and third decks. For behold, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, which is in the breath of life under heaven. Everything on the earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall come into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And of every living thing, of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark to keep alive with you. And they will be male and female, of the birds according to their kinds, and the animals according to their kinds, of every creeping thing of the ground according to its kind. 2 of every sort shall come in for you to keep alive. Also take with you every sort of food that is eaten, and store it up. It shall serve as food for you and for them. Noah did this. He did all that God commanded. As I mentioned, the story is looking pretty bleak where we just finished in verse 7. Man has done all these awful things. God sees it fit to judge them and destroy them all. But just as God sees all the evil and sees all the thoughts of the brokenness of the people, he also sees one man who is blameless. One man in a world full of unrighteousness who is seeking to walk with him. Now, if you are ever discouraged, that you feel like you're the only one doing right, if you feel like you're the only one who's seeking to walk with God, God notices you. I find a lot of comfort in that, right? Because we need that. We need to be reminded that God actually looks out for us and cares for us as we seek to walk with him. So what God does, he goes to Noah and he's going to speak to him because through Noah, God is going to destroy the earth and then bring about a free creation. We're in the book of Genesis, so it's about beginnings. It's about the beginning of the earth, right? And what we see in the beginning is that God brings land from water. So what's going to happen is, yet again, God's going to bring land from water, recreating the earth. Hopefully, this time, there will be doers of righteousness, unlike what happened in the past creation. So he tells them that he's going to make a covenant with him. That's a very important note. God makes promises all throughout the Bible, all throughout this text. We're going to see that promise come back after the ark has landed. We also constantly talk about Noah and his act of faith here. And I think we rightly should. The man is 500 years old, and God says, here is a tremendous vessel that you are going to have to build. And there's the type of questions that Noah would have had. Why everyone else would have questions about why he was doing this. They would be mocking him as they walked by. Here's crazy old Noah in his giant boat. Like, this is a weird thing for you to be doing. It would take a lot of faith, knowing that you're going to be building this for 100 years. In the text, there's nothing to indicate that Noah was a carpenter before this. Like, did he know how to actually build with gopher wood? Also, this ark, I think it's important to note that it's an ark and not a boat, because an ark is just a raft. There's no way to steer. Ultimately, while Noah had to obey the Lord, he was also going to have to depend on the Lord's mercy, that he wasn't going to crash. Who is really in control of the situation? Noah is simply obeying the commands of the Lord, and the Lord is choosing to have mercy. Again, that is what a part of our walk is. Understanding that when we walk by faith, when we obey, it is because of the mercy that has already been shown to us. And we are trusting that God already has control of the situation. And we just need to be walking by faith. So, Noah, despite maybe the questions he had or the doubts he had, he walks by faith, he obeys to the T. And we see in verse 22 that he has done all that God commands him. So after this boat is finished, naturally the judgment has to come. So God brings all the animals, at the beginning of chapter 7, he brings all these animals into the boat. Don't know how they got there exactly, but I'm sure the God who was able to bring about the flood and create all the animals was able to get them there somehow. So they all are there on the boat. And what happens after this, as we know, is that God is going to bring this flood. He's going to bring this judgment. So I want you to notice something out of this text as we're going to read 7 through the end of the chapter. I want you to notice the words, the breath of life, and see how those are contrasted. So we're going to look at that as we go through this text. Starting in verse 11, it says, "In the 600th year of Noah's life, and the second month of the 17th day of the month, on that day all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened, and rain fell upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. On the very same day, Noah and his sons, Shem and Ham and Japheth, and Noah's wife and 3 wives of his sons with them entered the ark. They and every beast according to its kind, and all the livestock according to their kinds, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth according to its kind, and every bird according to its kind, and every winged creature. And they went into the ark with Noah, 2 and 2 of all flesh, and those were the breath of life. And those that entered, male and female of all flesh, went in, as God has commanded him, and the Lord shut him in. The flood continued 40 days on the earth. The waters increased and bore up the ark, and it rose high above the earth. The waters prevailed and increased greatly on the earth. And the ark floated on the face of the waters. And the waters prevailed so mightily on the earth that all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered. The waters prevailed above the mountains, covering them 15 cubits deep. And all flesh died that moved on the earth, birds, livestock, beasts, all swarming creatures that swarm on the earth, and all mankind. Everything on the dry land in whose nostrils was the breath of life died. He blotted out every living thing that was on the face of the ground, man and animals and creeping things, and birds of the heavens. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those who were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days. It's really sad to think about what is happening in the story, right? We have, firstly, the rains that are coming down, as well as water from underneath the earth, coming to fill up and bring about God's judgment. I think it's very important that we're reminded is all the building has gone on. 100 years of building, 100 years of putting up tar, making sure that this thing is waterproof, making sure that it can float. But we should be so reminded that in verse 16, it talks about how the Lord shut him in. It is reminded that Noah could have been the worst or the best craftsman ever. But what mattered the most is that God was the one who was protecting him. God was the one who was going to preserve him, the life of his family, and all the animals. But as I mentioned earlier, I wanted you to look at and be thinking about the breath of life and how it's used in this passage. We see firstly in verse 15 that the breath of life is preserved through the animals on this boat and Noah's family. So the breath of life is important, and it's important enough for God to protect. But it is also mentioned in verse 22 as the breath of life leaves all the other creatures that are on the earth. And it is a reminder of the contrast that we see in here. Both ideas of God that are important for us to grasp. That God is merciful towards the righteous and is seeking the righteous. He is seeking those who walk with him. But there's also reality to his character that he is just and he cannot let injustice continue. So often we do not think that justice should be dealt out to us. It should be dealt out to other people. But we have to be reminded that in Christ, the hope is in not our perfection, but in God's mercy. Just as Noah, I believe, and his family learned from this picture. So all these things die. No doubt it would be a very hard, a very traumatic thing for the family to go through, knowing they're the only ones who are left alive in this situation. But as we get into chapter 8, we see that the flood is going to start subsiding. For almost a year, they're going to be waiting as the rain stops and the waters are going to start going down. And what we see is that Noah he lets some birds fly. He lets a raven fly. And dove with an olive branch has been a symbol of peace, a reminder that God is a God of peace who brings peace to his creatures. But I believe also in verse 9, I want to point out really quickly, the dove finds no place to set her foot. She finds no place to, in other words, rest. So just as we should be reminded of in the creation narrative, when God separates the waters, brings forth land, brings forth vegetation, as she just brought back in the olive branch. But also, on the final day, when God is ready, he rests with his creation. So the dove has not yet found rest. And then she does find rest, and so also does the ark find rest. What we see here is another story of creation, that God is giving mankind yet another chance to walk with me, to be righteous, to honor me all throughout your life. And I'm going to promise that I will be there with you. I promise that I'm going to bless you. So that's where we're going to pick up in Genesis chapter 8 and verse 20. I'm going to be reading a little while here down to chapter 9 and verse 13. It says, "Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and took some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man. For the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be on every beast of the earth, and upon every bird of the heavens, upon everything that creeps on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. Every moving thing that lives shall be as food for you. And as I give you the green plants, I give you everything. But you shall not eat the flesh with its life, that is, its blood. And for your lifeblood I will require a reckoning. From every beast I will require it, and from man. And from his fellow man I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Whoever sheds the blood of man by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image. And you, be fruitful, multiply, increase greatly on the earth, and multiply in it. Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, Behold, I establish my covenant with you, and your offspring after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, and every beast of the earth with you, as many as come out of the ark. It is for every beast of the earth. I establish my covenant with you, that never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood, and never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, This is the sign of the covenant that I make between me and you, and every living creature that is with you, for all future generations. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. So, Noah is now off the boat. He offers this sacrifice to God. Again, there's going to be a lot of things that harken us back to earlier in Genesis. Noah offers a pleasing sacrifice to God, just as Abel did, one of the first heroes of faith, the walkers with God. And God, in response to him, makes this promise that I am never going to do what I've done here again. That's essentially when it comes to flooding. Now, we do understand the idea that God is going to come and bring a final judgment, but that is, a ways away from Noah's time. But he does make promises to Noah, and all these are reminders of things that he's already promised to Adam and his family. He's told to be fruitful and multiply. That comes from Genesis 1. Man is supposed to fill the earth. He says that you have dominion over all the animals, over all creation. That is the same thing that is told in Genesis 1. He says that in verse 6, in 9:6, that God has made man in his image. That is Genesis 1:26 and 27. The same things are repeated. We need this reminder that God is not only the judge, but he is also the bringer of new life. And that is what is happening here in this recreation story. Here is the hope that because of my promises, because of my faithfulness, because of my mercy, you will act rightly. There's always this little sense that something is going to go wrong. We already saw that God knows that mankind is inclined to do wrong, is inclined to do evil, inclined to be selfish and prideful and angry. But God nevertheless understands he is still going to make a covenant. And the sign, he says, specifically is a bow. Right? And we associate that with the rainbow. But I think that it's important that we get both sides of this. And I think it helps understand the whole picture of the flood narrative. A bow is a weapon of war. So when God sets a bow in the cloud, it is a reminder of his justice. But you shine some light through water. And you understand that what comes on the other side is something beautiful in the rainbow. It is a reminder both of God's justice that he brings upon the earth, but also the mercy and the promise that he has made to man to never flood the earth again. So I believe it's important whenever we do have the opportunity to see a rainbow, that we see both sides of that God is just, and I deserve far worse than what I've received. But God is also merciful, and that is why I'm so thankful today. So no doubt Noah and his family probably for the rest of their lives would be reminded of this bow, just as we can be reminded of it as well. So what we have here at the end of, or as we've gone into chapter 9, we have a recreation. We have a promise made. We have all the animals under the dominion of man. We have man's dignity reformed, like all these things that are great. What we have in Noah is a new Adam, a chance to start over. And how well does that go? Our last passage I want to cover this evening, very different, is in Genesis 9, starting in verse 20. It says, Noah began to be a man of the soil, and he planted a vineyard. He drank of the wine and became drunk and lay uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. Then Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it on both their shoulders and walked backward and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned backward and they did not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine, he knew what his youngest son had done to him, and he said, Cursed be Canaan. A servant of servants shall he be to his brothers. He also said, Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge in Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. After the flood, Noah lived 350 years. All the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. So Noah has lived a very long life at this point. And a lot of it was a heartbreaking life. No doubt for 500 years walking around, seeing how the people around him were acting while he was trying to live faithful, that'd be horrible. But you also have the trauma of being on a boat and knowing that people are drowning outside. That's a lot to take. Some things that we have to really work on as followers of Christ, as Christians, is understanding that faith is putting our trust in God, but also learning to, when we have anxieties or frustrations or emotional deals, learning healthy ways to cope with those things. Unfortunately, what Noah does here is not try to deal with this in a healthy way. He goes to a vineyard, also a garden, and he partakes of fruit that is forbidden, replaying out the fall of man. And he decides to drink this wine, and he lays naked in his tent. So Noah should not be discounted as a man who lacked faith by any means. But it is just another reminder that as faithful as people may be, we are still fallen creatures. We still make mistakes. And that is why, as much as we can learn from the faith of Noah, the ideal is Christ. That is who I am striving to be like all the time. So as Noah lays, his youngest son, Ham, comes in and sees his father. Now, a lot of people want to read too much in this story, and all I want to say is that in an ancient Near Eastern context, seeing your father in this position was a horrible, horrible thing. It was a shameful thing. And Ham, in response to seeing his father, does not do anything to remedy the situation. He does not want to help. Instead, he's going to go and further the shame by gossiping to his brothers about what he saw. God has already done what he could in chapter 9 to reaffirm the dignity of man. And at the first opportunity, Ham rejects that. He treats his father as undignified. It's really heartbreaking. Not only do we have Noah's sin, but we also have Ham's disrespect, disregard for human life. Shem and Japheth come in and they cover their father instead of doing what Ham did. And when Noah wakes up, he curses of all people Canaan, which seems very confusing, right? Ham is the one who's done something wrong. But I'd like to see this less of as Noah putting down specifically a curse, but more of a prophecy. Because what we learn and what we know about the Canaanites, whether it be their offerings to Molech or their temple prostitution or whatever else they were doing, all they were doing was reinforcing the lack of dignity that Ham showed to everybody else. The Canaanites are going to fall into this pattern. This sets up the antagonists of the Israelites. These people who are so constantly rejecting God, they're going to do whatever they want to do no matter what. So it's very important for us to see. I think a lot of people have taken this and misread it for all sorts of ways. What's important about this text, we understand that just as God brings about this hope and brings about righteousness and shows this mercy, man ends up in the same position yet again. Dishonoring God, dishonoring one another, disregarding themselves and the dignity that God has placed within them. And that's why our hope is not in an Adam or a Noah, but our hope is in the perfect one, in Christ. Who is going to justify all peoples? Who could justify any of us? It is the only one who is perfect, the one who is willing to take God's justice upon himself. So, it's been a lot. I hope that you've gotten something new out of this. I've been studying this book since I was a little kid. Like my favorite story when I was a kid probably was this. I had a little ark that I played with, had the animals with it. So I hope that as we go through this text, if you've been going to congregations for a long time, you know the story well, that you see it from a little bit of a different angle, understanding the nature of godliness. But there are a couple of things I did want to mention just so we can wrap this up and you have a good understanding of what we try to talk about tonight. So, firstly, I believe we should learn that our sin is a lot greater than oftentimes we think. And our sin grieves God. It causes him pain. So our motivation for not sinning isn't just, I don't want to do something bad, but it breaks my Savior's heart. Why would I want to even get close to something that would make him miserable? I want to live my life in pursuit of him. That's the important part of understanding our sin. We have an understanding that God is the one who seeks justice and will ultimately bring about justice. One of the hopeful things that we have is knowing that there is a day coming when all things will be made right. Some people either don't have that belief or have no hope that something like that will ever come. So judgment is real because God is real and he judges perfectly. In a lot of ways, that should scare us because we are far from perfect and we need someone to intercede on our behalf. And that's why it's also important to learn from the story about God's mercy, extending to even one man in his family. Because who God is willing to save, who's going to say no? God is willing to show mercy, and he's shown mercy to all of us. And that is what we can have hope in. And that's why we need to be telling people justice is real, but so is God's mercy. We also have this understanding that God is able to work through broken people. That Noah, while he was seen as righteous and blameless, he was not perfect. We see that as evident. But through him, there was a bringing of hope and comfort and peace. The same thing happens when you and I go and tell the world and talk about what Jesus has done for us. That I was a broken, wretched mess. And God brought me out of that, no matter where you are, because we understand the depth of our sin and the mercy that has been shown to us on the other side. And the final point that I think is very important for us to give is that God brings life from death. Just as he did from the beginning, using dirt to create us. He does it yet again after he devastates the earth, bringing about hope through Noah and his family. And as Peter relates to us, through the waters of baptism we die, only be raised to the merciful arms of Christ. What needs to happen to all people is they need to understand that they are not good, and they need God's mercy. And they need to die to who they once were and are brought to new life. They are recreated, and they're called to walk with God. The picture of the whole scripture is redemption. The story of Noah is a picture of redemption. So we need to understand that God is both just and he is merciful, and he is willing to extend mercy to you. So I'm hopeful that if you are in Christ already, then this is where you've placed your hope. That you are constantly looking to God's mercy, understanding what he has done for you and the love he has for you. And if you're in this audience and you don't have that hope yet, you don't have that mercy, the opportunity is here and constantly here that God is willing to welcome you in. And I hope that you'll give yourself over to his mercy. And with that, we're going to be led in our invitation song. If there's a way that we can help you or serve you this evening, hope that you'll come forward as we stand and sing.